It's my understanding, Your Honor, that they are going to proceed up to the witness stand.
And I know we've had some people testify at trial, so obviously your full names were provided then, but if you qualify under the Victims' Rights Act, so you don't need to provide your full name. If you'd be more comfortable, you can just provide your first and last initial, but if you are comfortable providing your full name, then you're welcome to do that too. So Ms. Lento, I'll let you tell me who would like to come up first.
Your Honor, I believe that Cory's grandfather would first like to speak, and he would like to actually read a letter from Cory's aunt, if he may approach.
Hi, sir. Sure. Come on up.
Thank you.
Just watch your step. And again, you can provide us with your full name or just your initials.
Sure. Vito Micciolo.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Cory's grandfather. Thank you. My daughter has a letter that my youngest daughter that she is too emotional to read, so I'm going to read it, and it's something that I believe in strongly in her words. Your Honor, I am Cory Micciolo's aunt. I am writing this victim impact letter and asking that you give Christopher the maximum sentence possible for the following reasons. To start off, I was very involved in Cory's life from the day he was born, as all of us were. Cory's death at the hands of Chris, a person that was supposed to love him, had left a hole in the hearts of all his family, including myself. I can assure you that Cory was always happy and loved child, up until the day Christopher entered his life. I was there the day Cory was dropped off by Christopher for the very first visit. I remember that Cory went to the room when he got home, and I noticed his lip was swollen. Upon asking him what happened, he told me his father slapped him. This goes to show Chris's intentions from the very first visit. Chris immediately chose to exert power, control, and violence to establish fear in Cory, instead of showing love, caring, established respect between them. During Christopher's visitations, I was often given the painful job of being the one to give Cory to the DCP&P worker. Many times when he showed up, he would hide in the closet and beg not to go, to the point of having a panic attack. He would tell me how scared he was of his dad and to please not make him go. As much as I wanted to tell him he didn't have to go, I didn't have a choice in the matter. Sadly, this continued for the rest of Cory's life, very short life. This is the painful reality of what Cory and my entire family had to deal with every single time he was forced to see Christopher. I think it's only fair that Christopher has to finally face the consequences of his actions. The jury of his peers found him guilty, and I urge you to make him remain in prison for the maximum amount of time possible under the law. Cory didn't have a choice and wasn't shown any mercy. So either should Chris be given a choice of shown any mercy. I would go on and tell you stories. I could go on and tell you stories about the abuse Cory unfortunately had to endure. I truly hope you heard enough during the course of the trial and will render a significant sentence that forces Chris to understand the magnitude of his actions and deters others from abusing innocent children. Thank you for your time, Cory's aunt, Nicole Micciolo. I just want to add that for me and the times I spent with Cory, how he was trained to not say anything because he knew the ramifications. He couldn't tell me that was happening. I wanted him to tell me because I wanted to try to address it. I did try to address it with DCP&P. I made the phone calls, but he was definitely afraid of this guy. And in my short amount of times interacting with Chris, he's definitely got a very bad anger streak in him and a hate streak in him. So like I said, and like she said, please, you know, what he said is not true. He's a very hurtful person. He's very mean. And if he has a chance to do it again, he will do it again. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Lento.
Your Honor, I believe that Cory's grandmother would also like to address the court.
Hi, ma'am, thank you. Please watch your step. And you can either give us your full name or just your initials.
Rebecca Micciolo, Cory's Gmod.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, I want to start by thanking you for allowing me to address you today. I will not stand here and tell you that I forgive this monster, because I don't, and I will never. You'll never hear those words come out of my mouth. The actions of this man have greatly affected my life, the lives of my 2 daughters, my 2 sons, and my granddaughter, and 19,000 others from around the world, including Cory's teachers and doctors. On April 2nd, 2021, this man lost control, and he beat my grandson, and he denied him medical attention for several hours, only taking him to the hospital by car when Cory was within an hour of death, and leaving him to die with only a nurse and hospital staff around him, denying my daughter and myself to be with Cory, and denying Cory the comfort of having people who loved him with him as he took his last breath. This is not a man who should be shown mercy. My daughter slept in my bed many nights since Cory was murdered because she was afraid to be alone. We have nightmares. I see that treadmill video in my nightmares. That video that this monster sat in this courtroom and watched and didn't shed a tear. Not 1 ounce of remorse. I'm being treated for several mental health disorders since Cory was murdered. PTSD, nightmare disorder, depression and anxiety. I'm on several medications to get through the day. I can't work. I'm no longer living, Your Honor. I'm existing. Your Honor, this man took advantage of a 16-year-old child when he was 21. He used alcohol and drugs, and Cory was conceived as a result. Cory was the dirty little secret that Chris never wanted anyone to know about. He demanded an abortion. He met Cory when he came home from the hospital. He knew Cory existed, but hid the truth from his family for years. None of the Gregors wanted Cory. David Gregor told me Cory should have been aborted. This man has a long history of alcohol abuse, 2 DUIs, drug abuse, domestic violence resulting in a restraining order, and child abuse that started long before he had visitations with Cory. He abused an ex-girlfriend's son while they were living in the Gregor home in Monroe Township. The DCP&P case was closed after the girl moved out of state. The system failed Cory, but Chris Gregor and his family also failed Cory. This man has never had to answer for any bad behavior. It seems it always went away somehow. Your Honor, my life will never be the same. Cory was wanted, loved, and doted upon by my family. We enjoyed watching and helping Brianna raise him. I have difficulty going into a store and seeing little boy clothes and toys that Cory would have loved. In September, when everyone is preparing their kids to go back to school, I wonder what backpack or shoes Cory would have chosen. I can't go to my nephew's house for my great-nephew's birthday parties because seeing them makes me sad. Cory should be at those parties. I find myself looking at kids who are the age Cory would have been, and I wonder what Cory would look like now. I cry several times a day. My physical appearance has changed. My health has declined. I've aged. I'm angry, sad, bitter, and mostly I'm broken. This man has shown no remorse as he sat through the trial. I watched every second, and he didn't shed a tear for Cory. He's had discussions with fellow inmates about wanting Brianna to be killed. I'm sure he doesn't think we heard about that, but with social media, things do get out. This is not a man who can be rehabilitated. My family lives in fear, wondering if he will attempt to have my daughter killed, because we all know what he's capable of. My granddaughter visits her brother's grave and sits on the ground and plays with toys left there for Cory by strangers from all over the world. This makes me so sad, watching Brianna watch her daughter play at Cory's resting place. Cory wanted a baby sister so bad, and now she's here, but he's not, and Gregor is the reason he isn't here. I often wonder what or how we will explain to my granddaughter that Cory isn't here. Do we tell her his father killed him, so then she can wonder if that's what daddies do? Your Honor, Cory also wanted a father, but instead he got this monster who ridiculed him, deprived him of food, love, compassion, and beat him and abused him daily until his final beating on April 2nd, 2021. Your Honor, Cory knew he was going to die. On the Sunday prior to Cory's death, just 5 days before his death, Cory was at my house and preparing to take a bath. When he undressed, he was covered in bruises in various stages of healing. One stuck out because it was very large, and it was on the left side of his chest. I had to turn away so Cory didn't see the tears in my eyes. Once Cory was dressed, we sat in my bed. Cory looked at me and he said, "Hey, Gima, does God see what my daddy does to me?" I told him God sees everything. His voice got very low. He said, "Why doesn't he help me?" My heart was breaking as I told him that God was helping someone else who needed him more right now. Cory then asked why his daddy wasn't going to hell. And I replied, "He will someday." That same Sunday, Cory was outside writing with chalk on the sidewalk. Later in the day, Brianna and I noticed that Cory had written, "I died," near our front door. Cory's curiosity about God, heaven, and death grew prior to his death. On April 2nd, when Cory was getting ready to go back to Gregor's house, I told him, "Take my cell phone and hide it and call when, not if, when his dad beats him." He said, "Gima, I can't." I told him to run to a neighbor, to which he replied, "I can't," his little face so serious. Cory knew nobody could help him. He knew he was going to die, and he accepted it. Your Honor, my conversation with Cory 5 days prior to his death and the day of his death will forever haunt me. My family was not allowed to be with Cory as he took his last breath because this man wouldn't tell us where Cory was. We weren't allowed to see Cory after he passed at the hospital because he was now evidence. My 6-year-old grandson was dead and now labeled evidence. This is what I have to live with every single day. Cory was taught in preschool by a lovely teacher, Kristen Oyen, that actions have consequences. Please teach this man that his actions have consequences. On May 1st, 2014, Cory Travis Micciolo was born. I was there holding Brianna's hand and I was there to cut Cory's umbilical cord. When he was placed in my arms for that very first time, I whispered, "Hi, baby. I'm your grandma. I'll love you and protect you forever." Your Honor, I wasn't able to keep my promise to protect Cory, so I'm begging you to give Gregor the harshest punishment possible today. Cory Travis Micciolo loved the solar system. He loved to draw. He loved his mommy and his family. He was smart and funny. He loved helping others. Cory wanted a daddy, but instead, he got this monster, Gregor. Your Honor, please give Cory justice today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Ms. Lento.
Thank you, Judge. I believe that Cory's mother would also like to address the court.
All right, please come on up. Please watch your step. Again, you can use your initials or your full name.
Brianna Mitchell.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Your Honor, my name is Brianna Micciolo, and I appear before you today not only as a grieving mother, but also an advocate for justice. On behalf of my son, Cory, I stand here before you to plead for justice that Cory rightfully deserves, and to press for the maximum sentence of Christopher Gregor, whose actions have inflicted irreparable harm in our lives. For you to fully understand the gravity of the situation, I will flash back to the July of 2013. This day marks the beginning of a traumatic journey defined by manipulation, abuse, and ultimately an unspeakable loss. At 16, I first met the defendant, who was 21 at the time. He proceeded to feed me drugs, alcohol, and took complete advantage of me, which led to the conception of Cory. From day one of my pregnancy, I knew I would keep Cory, regardless of the way he was conceived. Cory didn't ask to be brought into this world, and I knew I owed it to him to bring him into this world with unconditional love. Cory was and still is my life, my world, and my everything. I would also like to speak about my past, which I am not 100% proud of. You heard a lot about it throughout the trial, and so did a lot of the world. It was very upsetting for that to come out because I've worked extremely hard for many years to be where I am today. I admit I abused drugs, but during the trial it was made out that for some reason my son deserved to be killed because his mom was a drug addict. That is absolutely disgusting. I stand here today clean and sober, and I know Cory would be so proud of me. Unfortunately, my son is no longer here to tell his story, so I'm here to be his voice and tell his story along with all the others sitting in the gallery who have continued to stand by me. Not once have you seen the defendant shed a tear for Cory in the last 3.5 years since he killed him, and today was fake. I don't believe a word he said, and I don't accept any apologies. He has no remorse for any of the actions he committed, and his only remorse, like you saw today, was for himself because he got caught and convicted. Another reason I could think of is, everything he had done to Cory was done out of spite towards me. Another reason I could think of is he's sick in the head and used Cory as his punching bag. On April 2nd of 2021, it was not the first time that he abused Cory, but it was the last time. He never had an ounce of love for Cory. And to the defendant, Cory was just an inconvenience in his life. He never hugged him. He never praised him. He never told him he was proud of him or that he did a good job. He punished Cory every chance that he could get, and I cannot even begin to imagine what my son dealt with behind closed doors with this man. On April 2nd of 2021, I hesitantly dropped Cory off at the defendant's home, which is a mistake that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I kissed my son goodbye unknowingly for the last time. I wish I knew what was going to happen and I would never let him go. At 3 p.m. the same day, I received a phone call from the defendant. where he stated Cory was very sick and he was taking him to the hospital, and then hung up on me after he asked for my insurance card. As an extremely concerned mother, I called him back with no answer and continued to do so along with texts for hours to find out where Cory was and what was going on. For those few hours, my mother and I called every hospital in the area with no luck. The very last hospital finally said he was there. Then there was a knock on the door. It was our local police there to tell me Cory had passed away. My healthy 6-year-old boy who was just alive and well with me a few hours ago is dead. My heart dropped and my whole body collapsed from the shock that took over my whole body. I was unable to breathe. My mind was racing, and I felt like I was no longer inside my body. All I remember is screaming that they had the wrong child because Cory was fine this morning. I actually convinced myself that it wasn't him and they had the wrong kid for a while. My next question was, where is Chris? I needed to know what happened, and he was nowhere to be found until the next day, when I found out he was in Tennessee. No one was able to tell me what happened to Cory except Cory died at the hospital. I couldn't even see my son until a week later at his funeral because his body was evidence. But the defendant took away my chance to say goodbye to Cory while he was passing away. And not once did he pick up the phone he was using to converse with many of his girlfriends, to call 911, to seek medical attention, which could have potentially saved Cory's life. Instead, he allowed Cory to suffer silently for hours. Once he realized how bad it was, he threw him in the car and then proceeded to drive 15 minutes to the hospital. He slowly walked Cory into the hospital with no sense of urgency, even when he knew how bad his condition was. I fully believe that if we took Cory to the hospital as soon as he received the lethal blow, he could still be here today. There were many steps he could have taken to save my son's life. Instead, he sat home and let Cory slowly die for hours. Every day since April 2nd has been an absolute living nightmare, and it is now the new reality for me to replay Cory's horrific death repeatedly in my head. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep at night. I dread normal conversation with people, because I always get asked, how many kids do you have? I say 2, and they follow up asking how old are they. That's when the grief sinks in, and I have to tell them my 6-year-old was killed by his father. It is such an indescribable feeling. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, a sense of guilt was all I could feel. I wanted more kids, but how do I love another child? Is it fair to Cory? That is all I could think about. Now I know this is not true, and I love my daughter with all my heart, but I always will feel an emptiness, no matter how many children I have. My new reality is explaining to my daughter what happened to her big brother and why is he not here. I live in fear every day, every second of the day, that something will happen to my daughter, and I will lose her too. It's a horrible feeling, and it causes me such bad anxiety. I take her to the cemetery to see Cory every weekend, and at 1.5 years old, she knows where Cory is, buried. It is every week. It is heartbreaking. She sits in police with the cars and toys we left there for him. I live in a nightmare, and I would never wish this feeling or how I must live on my worst enemy. Throughout everything he did to Cory, Cory still loved him. He looked up to you, and he still wanted to be, I'm sorry. And he still wanted him to be like a real father who treated him like a son. Instead of being a good role model for Cory, he decided to beat him to death. Why? Were you jealous of him? Did you hate me so much that you took it out on Cory? Were you abused as a child? Not that that's a good excuse, because you could have overcome it and became the protector he needed as a child, but instead you became a killer. There was no amount of love in his actions, and only a disturbing amount of hate. It seems like he hated Cory simply because I loved him, and he felt deprived of that love. He couldn't even control himself for long because after the first visit with my son, he started abusing him. My son didn't even know him, and he was beating him. He was abusing him from the first time. I thank God. I hate you for not letting me say goodbye to my son, but I thank God your face is not the last one he saw. I'm sorry. What this monster did was pathetic, disgusting, and I wish him nothing but the worst. One could only hope that karma comes to him quickly. After all he's done, you would hope he'd admit what he's done, but no. Instead of grieving, I had to fight for justice for 3 long years. Go to trial just to relive everything. I had to see that video that I never wanted to see. I didn't have to see it until 2 weeks before this trial. I went 3 years without seeing it. Oh, I'm sorry. Just for you to be found guilty anyway. What was the point of that? Just to make it worse for us? Are you that crazy that you convinced yourself you didn't do this? I hate you. I will never forgive you. And I'm going to skip that one. You have stolen my full potential at happiness. And I will never have my son back. My family will never feel whole again. My daughter will never get to meet her brother. And my boyfriend will never get to be the father that the defendant should have been to our son. He took my whole world away from me. He has shown and proven to be that special kind of dirtbag he claimed I was. Your Honor, all this monster had to do was say he did not want to be a father. No one would have made him. I would have happily continued to raise my son alone with the help of my family. He had many opportunities not to do this to him. He is in this current situation due to his own actions, and every day he will have to live with this. He deserves nothing less than to experience the pain, suffering, and isolation that he inflicted on Cory. I hope that every moment he spends in prison is haunted by the torment of knowing he killed my child. I fear when Christopher Gregor gets out of jail, whenever that is, he will come after my family and I again. I fear for our lives. His twisted mind truly thinks that I caused all this and that he's in jail because of me, even though he's here because he killed him. I truly believe if he ever gets out and gets the opportunity, he will kill me. Your Honor, Cory should be going into 5th grade in September, hanging out with his friends, playing sports and enjoying his life. Instead, he will never experience finding his first girlfriend, graduating high school, falling in love, driving a car, getting married, or having kids. Christopher robbed him of his entire future, and Cory could have easily lived until he was 80 years old. He stole over 70 years from Cory and thousands of memories we could have made. I will never see my son again. I miss him and I love him so much. There are countless reasons Christopher deserves the maximum sentence. He rejected what I considered a generous plea deal, which shows how selfish and ignorant he is as a person. I beg you to not allow this injustice to continue, and he must face the full consequences of his actions. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Your Honor.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Ms. Lenta,
Your Honor, the state would move for imposition of sentence. I don't know if counsel has anything else.
you previously asked for permission to play some video. You wish to do that? Mr. Galucci, do you have something else?
Yeah, Your Honor, Mr. Gregor, if you would allow it, at this point, would like to address the court.
What's the state's position?
Your Honor, we would defer to the court.
So I offered you that opportunity earlier, and I don't want this to become, I was about to ask Ms. Micciolo to address her comments to me, but I don't want this to become an attack by one family on the other. I'd be happy to hear comments directed towards character issues or the sentence to be imposed, not to refute topics that are outside the scope of this trial. So, with that proviso, I'll be happy to hear from, you're talking about David Gregor, correct?
I am.
Yes.
I haven't spoken to him, so his son would like him not to speak.
Well, I'm not going to take a position one way or the other. Mr. Gregor, I recognize you obviously from testifying at the trial, if you'd like to speak. I have your letter, I read your letter and your wife's letter.
To be honest with you, having just learned I had the opportunity to speak 5 minutes before we began, I actually would like to read the sentencing letter as it's all factual information and is related to the last year and a half of Cory's life.
So it's questionable whether or not you actually have the right to speak. What I indicated to Mr. Gallucci is my practice typically is to exercise some discretion to allow an immediate family member of a defendant to speak. But I've read every single letter submitted on behalf of the defense, and so and your letter is 8 pages, single-spaced. So I'll be happy to hear some comments from you or some summary of that, but I mean, I can read, sir, and there's no point in you reading all 8 pages again for the benefit of whoever. I have it, and I've read it thoroughly, so, but again, I'd be happy to hear from you by way of whatever you'd like to add or summarize.
Your Honor, if you don't mind me summarizing on the fly, I think there's factual information that refutes some of what I just heard.
Your Honor, the state's going to object to that. I mean, we're here for a sentencing. The defendant has been convicted by a jury of his peers. Him making, at this point in time in the sentencing, factual discrepancy arguments is not appropriate, and we would object to his comments at this point.
So first, let me say that despite all of the information that's been submitted by both sides, I'm not allowed to sentence someone for things that haven't been proven. So while I appreciate people have made various comments about conduct outside the scope of these crimes, I'm just simply, and I was going to place a detailed reasons on the record why I'm not permitted to consider certain things. So you may not need to refute the things you need to refute, but I'm going to exercise my discretion and allow you to provide some type of verbal statement to the court that you believe is relevant to the sentencing, with the understanding that the state can object in the middle of that if it becomes improper.
Thank you, Judge.
I just ask you to perhaps move up a little bit so we can make sure we pick you up on the court's recording system. That's perfect, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Sir, I said in the court, for when we were allowed, my wife and I, for every day I could be at the hearing, there was a lot of information in terms of Cory's upbringing while he was at the Gregor house in Monroe Township. And quite frankly, there were some references today to it that alluded to the fact that he was abused during that time period. That the first visit, which I was a part of, he left with a bloody lip, and he did, from getting a soccer ball in the mouth when he bent down to pick up the ball. I think, in all fairness to Chris, despite the fact that we looked at a 12-day time period in terms of determining his guilt, that you look at the holistic life with Cory from the day he entered the Gregor household on the first visits to the point where they left and they went to Barnegat. I think it's unfair to say that during that time period he was unhappy, he was afraid to go to the Gregor house at first when he was doing the visitations. He liked nothing better than to come to our house. He was treated like a king. Many times he was supervised with myself and my wife. His turnaround in school was absolutely incredible. He came to us classified as emotionally disturbed, and part of the reason that we agreed as a family to assist Chris in bringing him to our home was the background that not only Chris had with schooling and dealing with children who had those kinds of disabilities, was because of my involvement with my children and in bringing them up through the education system. I listened and I heard about socioeconomic as to why he was doing so well with us in terms of his development, and I think that's just totally unfair. Cory thrived when he was in Monroe in every aspect. His speech improved, his ability to go from classes where he needed constant help to thriving in a general education class, to the markedly increase of his grades, to his social ability. He joined all types of sports. Chris was actively involved in everything from soccer, basketball, baseball, whatever he could play, Chris fostered it. Chris volunteered to coach. To say that he was unhappy and he was abused, it didn't go on for the 8 months he was at our house. And I can say that on behalf of my wife, my other son, and my daughter, who interacted with him daily. When I hear stories about how he was afraid to come to the house and talk about certain things that Chris did, there are many things he shared with me that I'm sure you don't want to hear in terms of his treatment beyond our house. It's in my letter, and I know you've read it. I also know that you have access to the DCP and P reports. There's a lot of factual information that didn't come out in the trial, and it's a shame. I know you considered, and the judge, the jury considered only the evidence that was presented. The problem is all this information went out through the media, and only one side went out. You've noticed since day one that my family and I sat back and said nothing. There's much we could say to counter what was being presented here and what was being presented in terms of attacking us on social media. There's so much more to say. I trust that you've read the 8-page letter. I had only hoped that the information in there, and it's all factual information, it's all backed up by going to a police report, a DCP and P report, statements on the telephone. Everything that I said, there's a piece to back it up. It's evidence. It's not my opinion. It actually happened. The problem is those 8 pages are not read to anyone else. It's going to be up to me and my family subsequent to this to get that information out, because what was presented here is so one-sided. I don't know, and I don't use the word fair or equitable, but in terms of Cory's upbringing and how well he was doing, it wasn't talked about and it wasn't presented, and I think that's a shame.
Thank you for your comments, sir. All right, anything more from the state?
Your Honor, we do have some pictures we would like to show the court regarding Cory. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. This case is about Cory, and the state would move for imposition of sentence.
So thank you. The record will reflect that the state played a